This stuff here, Yerushalmi Eruvin, the article Oz edition where Mamish at the top of Samach Tes Amav, where it says Mishnah Gimel Machzir Ritir B'Mikdash, which is the middle of the Mishnah, but yes, it went on so long, we stopped in the middle of the Mishnah. And in the Vilna, that is on Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis, we see in the middle of the Mishnah, which is towards the top, Allah Aleph, that's 3 lines on the top of the Mishnah, 5 lines on the top of the page. So, Machzir Ritir B'Mikdash, picture of the Perish Chai. Ritia is the, according to the way he has it here, it's not, there's a wrapping. I guess they didn't have adhesive back then. That's a good point. Wrapping, and there's a bandage, the plaster, as they call it in Hebrew, plaster, underneath it. And that ritia, you can put back on in the Beis HaMikdash, but not b'medina. But in B'tchila, if you to put it there to begin with, it wasn't tied in Miboid Yoim, Kamakan Osir. It's both. It's Osir in both. So let's see Korban Eidah. It's helpful. Machzir Ritia Kohen Shalaka Biyado. Kohen has a wound in his hand. Menasla Ritia Miboid Yoim. Put Ritia on it before Shabbos began. Vutzach Lavoda b'Shabbos. He has to avoid it on Shabbos. If not the Ritia Mayodi, took off the plaster. Shalotei Chotzes Ben Oben Yodo. Because he can't have a chatzitza interruption between his hand and the avoda. The chatzitza posels because the interruption renders the avoda unfit. The ba'in of akacha kohen, he needs the kohen to take it, the cave and the chayitz, love the kill be kohen, and the kohen, since there's chatzitza, will not be taking whatever he's supposed to take in his hand. Machzir lachar avoda. He's allowed to put it back after the avoda. Lo shayis zira. If you don't let him put it back, mimnav lo avoda is going to refrain from doing the avoda. Avlo Medina, but Medina don't let it put it back because there's Shem Yimra Charatia, because the plaster is a plaster. It has some sort of substance on it, gooey substance. And you goes because of rubbing and working. If it wasn't there from before Shabbos began, or this going now remove it for the purpose of avodah, kamakan osir, can't put it back. But this is, he would not say the general principle there's no shvusa beis hamikdash. Why? Because the avodah hay shvus lav tzorach avohu. Because here he's not doing it for the purpose of the avodah tzorach atzmo, but for his own purposes. Okay, so says Gemara, Rabbi Yosef Eruvin said, "Lo kol shvus yitir b'mikdash." Not every shvus is mutzah beis hamikdash. That's why the Tanakama said, "Machzir tir tachta b'mikdash," right? But not the tir elyon, because not every shvus is mutzah beis hamikdash. Tani lo yechadam is planis. A person should not rub himself with this plaster. Isplanis is the Ritia. He shouldn't rub it. He shouldn't come to rub it into a rub it. It's not really into a skin, but rub the plaster to smooth it, because then the Amrech b'Shabbos chayv chatas, somebody who rubs it on Shabbos and smooths it is chayav Shabbos. The way Korban puts it, shemachlik gumas shabatia. You smooth the holes in the bandage. Name Moshe is interesting. Different story. It says tani loy kanechadam is planis b'Shabbos mileicha shalamaka. Shouldn't move the moisture of the makkah shlo yavol de miruach, because then you're going to remove the moisture from the makkah from the ritia from the plaster. So then you're going to smooth out the plaster as a result. So it's interesting. There's the blush in the Bavli is you shouldn't do it because naturally, but rather because by smoothing the ritia you are mimarech. And the Yerushalmi is that you might come lidei miruach. So actually Rambam used the lashon in the Yerushalmi in Perikov Avaloch of Zayin V'Chol Shabbos. So it could be that that's the difference in the perushim which are given here, and they're really taken from Rashi and the Bavli as well. In other words, the if you hold a Maikam Gumos in the Ritia, that's that you might come to be Mareach. If you call the removing the moisture, smoothing the moisture on top, that you are Mimareach. It could be that's the difference between the two Perushim. Whether it's Lashon Yerushalmi is more precise, the Lashon the Bavli is more precise. Again, Mashvui Gumos, you might come to Mashvui Gumos in the Ritia. removing the moisture, you are smoothing it by definition, the top of the retia. But I think people make the mistake, including myself, that the memarech is the rubbing on the skin. It's not the rubbing on the skin. It's the smoothing of the substance. In this case, the plaster, and which is the issue of memarech. Okay, so so again. Tiny loikanech is Spanish. Shemi avoid de miruach. Merech Shabbos chayav chatos. Merech Shabbos chayav chatos. So Mara says Vatani, and we're going to go to Bnei Moshe here, who says Bnei Chusa. Bnei Korban also says Bnei Chusa. Vatani Bnei Chusa. Tiny nami hachi. It's in the Brisa. This principle. Hichlika mimatan lamatan. So if you you can rub the you can smooth the plaster from I read wrong. Matan machzira lemalon. Then you can put it back. You smooth from the bottom. You can put it back on top. If you smooth it from the bottom, machzira lemata, you can put it back on the I'm complicating this too much. It came out. The material came out of that binding which we saw. So chlita milmatan, Mazilmai can push it back up. Right? Chlita milmalan, if it's got smooth, it went up from the binding. You can push it back down again. Also, megam mixas iswas mikan, you can move a little bit down, peel it down a little bit. Mikan, and you can dry out the wound. Megam mixas mikan, you can move a little bit on this side, and smooth out the wound a little, and dry out the wound a little bit. Avol, and here's the punchline. This is why I brought down the baisa. Avolei kanech panis. Don't smooth out the plaster itself. Shaloli v'nei miruach, so you shouldn't cut the miruach v'amarech v'Shabbos chayav chatos, and somebody who's mimarech on Shabbos is chayav chatos. Okay, so next halacha about retia, tani retia shetofcha. So the it got bloated in the middle. It pierced Maka, and therefore it was partial makma. I guess the Bnei Moshe is actually saying the same thing. Makmas came piercing Maka. Yeah, it seems like the same thing. So if it got bloated in the middle, like it started coming out. The Machzir of Shabbos. You can put it back on Shabbos, press it back down against the wound. Rabbi Yah said, that is if it's bloated opposite the makkah, and therefore you can tamp it down again. The Vatani, and we learned the Bryce, and this Bryce also is both say it's evidence. Like we said, similar to what we said before. If it's slid out from the makkah, towards the bottom, you can put it back up again. If it's slid upwards, you can put it back down. But you should not, as long as it hasn't completely slid off the makkah, then you can't put it back. Evidently, that's much in the Mikdash and not in the Medina. You can't take it completely off and put it back down again. Okay, as long as it's still there, but it's tafcha, you can tamp it back down. Okay, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yossi said there's a separate issue. Besides the issue of Shemachek, there's the issue of Shchika, of you refer on Shabbos Shchika Samamanim, which don't generally let you do refuahs on Shabbos because you might come to grind herbs for medicinal purposes. So he says, Makas Yisrap is if you have a wound which is healed, and you just want to make sure it remains clean, protected. No similar so I guess you have like a scab there or something like that. You put on it a bandage, it's only safeguarding it. So there's no isav shchika samamoni, no prohibition unless you come to grind herbs for medicinal purposes on Shabbos. Okay, so the again, just safeguarding it. Right, Boom Rabbanan Tamon said. The Buddha named Rabbanan Tamon said the Rabbanan in the in Chutz La'aretz said that no simatia gabi maka b'Shabbos. You put a bandage on a maka on Shabbos she'ena ela k'mishamra, because you're only safeguarding it. Now this seems to contradict what we just said. It says before it said maka shenisrapes, but it says a maka mamish, and that seems to contradict our Mishnah, which says you're not allowed to put a ratia on a maka on Shabbos. So the it could be true about a dry ratia instead of one which is moist or sticky. But the art scroll in the name of Reb Chaim, even though Reb Chaim himself doesn't do this in the text, seems that he's correct that from the Perush, he actually was suggesting that in other words, Reb Chaim does not change the text. The art scroll changes the text. That it should see here really oleh, because that's the next sort of a leaf. And leaf, you're allowed to put. It's not a bandage, not mechsek refuah, because it's just a leaf. So it should say nosnin nosnin mitir gabi maka. It say nosnin oleh agabi maka b'Shabbos she'ein ela k'mishamra. Okay, and that on a tanchuma chutz me'elei gefanim, exposed to except for leaves, which are from grape leaves, because they actually are evidently considered to be medicinal. Rav Huna said, Hada pua, a certain plant called a pua, ikar tavhu sagin. It's a very good root, and it's for medicinal purpose. Kat isba chamisha o shiva o tisha kutrin. If it has 5 or 7 or 9 knots, whatever those knots are. Uvachlite moi. So as long as it's not exuding water, I guess it has to be dry in order for it to be effective. So once you talk about the issues of refuah, we have another halacha. Anchorim pasuk gabi maka b'shem. So you're not allowed to use a pasuk which has one of the shemos in it as an incantation on a makkah. V'hein dekral yavrucha asur, and these it's a very interesting shot here. First says yavruchas min choli. Then it says Yerushalmi Eruvin hema dudoim miskarim beruvin. These are dudoim which are Eruvin jasmine. V'okra mistakin, somebody uproots them is in danger. Mash oskos sukim alok v'akon, so you can't do it magically. Remove these plants in the ground magically by reading a pasuk. It sounds like from it sounds like it's the from Reb Chaim that normally it's also just to use a shame with a pasuk with a shame, although the Bavli does not say b'shem. Only Yerushalmi says b'shem. But it seems in Yerushalmi, and normally it's only also used a pasuk which has a shame to mean misrape. By jasmine, by the avrucha, even a pasuk which doesn't have a shame is still also. That's what seems to be the pshat, and I guess maybe because it's more of an issue because of it's mentioned the dudoim and the psukim. I don't know. According to the first time in the Korban Eidos said that it's not the jasmine mentioned the pasuk, it's a type of choli. So I don't know what the difference is. Evidently, for some reason, that was more of a Darchei Mori issue or something like that. The first issue, according to Pasuk Al Makah B'Shem, is to be Zoyin Shem Hashem. The second one seems to be more like a Darchei Mori issue. Okay, Bokra Pasuk Zeh, person says, come and read this Pasuk. Al Bni, next to my son, who meets by Ace. He's fearful. There's some sort of psychological issue. Tainlov sefer or tefillin, put on him a sefer tefillin shel shishin, or that he should sleep. That again, it seems like this is some sort of darkei mori type thing. But also, it's also to do this. It's on all this thing that you can't say psukim on Makkah. So Tanya, they would say Yoshe B'Seiser, which is the Shishab Goyim, to prevent damage in Yerushalmi. Why is it not saying pasuk in Makkah, which is also? Or maybe they said Kanat Shalonivka, before you get hurt. It's like a tefillah, and that's okay. Once you get hurt, to say it's like an incantation, and that's also. What is Shir P'goyim? So the first shot is Mara Butzarai V'chol HaMizmor. It is that it's Mara Butzarai, where it says V'atosha Magen Badi in the Mizmor, and then the second shot is Yoshe B'Seisayon Ar Ata Machsi. And there it's where it says, let's maybe it's down, Midar Vavos, Bachalayla, Chesof Yomam, etc., etc. Okay, so to the Mshatim, what Shir Shabgoyim is. Tell him, I think it's Nun, or tell him Tzaikaf. It's hard for me to read the reference here. Yeah, tell him Nun. Is that a Nun? Or Gimel? No, it's a Gimel. Tell him Gimel. Tell him Gimel or tell him Tzaikaf. Okay. Next Mishnah. Halach Yud Beis. Koshin Nimin B'Mikdash Avolo B'Medina. So here we have also somewhere a picture, if I can find it over here. So the Perish Chai learns it's a violin. A violin has strings, right? So if a violin, and they used to use them on Shabbos. If you hold Iker Shir B'Kli, you have to use them on Shabbos, and we're going to discuss in the Gemara. So you can tie that snap string back together again. The Mikdash Shlo Medina, Imitchila, but that's already stretched before Shabbos and on the violin. But to put it there to begin with, even the Beis Hamikdash is also okay. Choschin yabelas, you can cut off a wart, which is a mum in the on a korban. That's one possibility, or on a kohen, where it's also mum. So you can cut off the wart on the Beis Hamikdash, Avol Medina, but not in the outside Beis Hamikdash. But it's only with your hand, or with your I think with your teeth also, but not with the keli. In Mikli, Kamakan Osir. Okay, the Gemara is going to discuss that further. This last case. Okay. So the Amr soon said, this is the low, and here it says the Rashba, but the Chaim and the Mashbiach both changed it to low Karabi Shimon ben Elazar, not like the Rashba, but the low Rashba. It's not like Shimon ben Elazar. In the following brisa, the time of Shimon ben Elazar, Shimon ben Elazar said, Nima Shebakino Shenivska v'Kashra he ain't a mashmas as a kol. You can't even tie in the Beis Hamikdash because a string which snaps in the Beis Hamikdash and a string which snaps in the violin and it'll be tied, it doesn't give off a proper sound. And mishal shemilamalo of the oina milamaton. So rather you wrap it around the pegs. So or I guess knobs they're called over here. You wrap them around the knobs over here. And then you make an aniba, which is like a slip knot, not a real knot, because not real. It's not a knot. It's tying in the middle. It's not going to help anywhere. So therefore, you make that. You wrap it around, and you make a slip knot, which I guess could also be. He points out there knobs on the top and knobs on the bottom. Knobs over here, and knobs over here. And it's this kind of slip knot down here. Okay, so you somehow wrap around on top, and then you make a slip knot on the bottom. I don't know exactly. You wrap around this knob, and then you make a slip knot down here below the bottom. In any event, the point is that you can't tie it. So our mission is not like going to Shemir Elazar. Time of Shemir Elazar Mer Hakoni Valvim B'Yisrael Uklei Shir Ma'akmis HaKorban. In order for a korban to be properly accepted as a reach nichoch, you have to have kohanim, levim, and Yisraelim present, and that's why we have the concept of the ma'amad, as the Korban says, the kohanim la'avodah, v'levim l'duchan, v'Yisrael ma'amodim, shu shluchem shekol Yisrael, there should be Yisraelim standing there, and klei shir. Need to have klei shir. So the klei shir are essential even on Shabbos. Beles Mikdash lo Medina can cut off a wart in the base of Mikdash, not outside the base of Mikdash, not in the Medina. Tamati we learn Chatichas Yivalto Ein Dochin. So we have a question here. It says that Sachim, it says that the cutting of the wart is not doche. If you have one of the Korban Pesach, it's not. You know what I think it says? No. It's about the cutting the wart of a human being. So you can't cut the wart of a human being on Shabbos Yontif. You're saying that you can't cut off the wart. Right? It says does work the base on Mikdash. So a fascinating answer here. How do you reconcile them? So we're going to go to Bnei Moshe. I mentioned before the Abelis is both by the korban and by the person. The korban Eda goes with the shot that it's going on, cutting off the cutting off the abelis from the korban, and you already designated korban, and you did a pice for it. And if it has the abelis and you don't cut off the abelis, you have to do one from scratch. But both of Chaim Yerushalmi Kipshuto endorsed the Pnei Moshe, who says about you did a pice with the Kohen had the abelis on a wart, and now turns out he has this wart. So you have to do the pice again if you do not remove the wart. So he says, therefore, the Gemara goes on and says, better cut off the wart, then I have to start from scratch the procedure again. So they already made the pice. If we know Kohen has a wart, we don't let him do the pice. But here we didn't know they had a wart, and they did the pice, so then we can cut off afterwards as long as you don't use a kli. Amar Rishim Lo Shem Levi. Rishim Lo said it says again we had before Shem Levi Sichia. This is like either the place it came from or some other reason why they call him that. But the difference is the word Bain appears here twice. Bain Nifrachas, Bain Shein Nifrachas. The Korban Reb Chaim Bnei Moshe all changed it to Kam Nifrachas, Kam Shein Nifrachas. He said that if it's, it depends how dried and shriveled it is. So if it's still moist, it doesn't just crumble when you touch it, then you can't cut it. And that is the what it says in Psachim. And here, wherever you can't cut it, it's where it's already dried and shriveled anyway, as if it fell off already. Therefore, that's dried skin. So therefore, you can cut it off again now with a keli on Shabbos Yontif. The Rishim, in other words, it crumbles when you touch it. Rishim ben Yokim Amar is not as extreme. He says, Kam belach kam b'yavesha. Even if it's not completely shriveled and just crumbles off when you touch it, a moist one you can't cut off. If it's dry one, you can't cut off. He says, no, the difference is, our Mishnah say about using your hand. That's okay. A keli you can't use. So, Asya, to Rabbi Shimon Yokim Kebar Kapara. So Rabbi Shimon Yokim, who drew a distinction between Lach and Yavesha, goes like Bar Kapara we're about to learn. Yosef Chanina, who said that the difference is can be clearly, is going like Rabbi Yechon are about to learn. The Tani, we learn. Kol Mekachlin Peturin, Anybody who's any kilkel which is mekalkel is pater. Chutzim mavir v'eschabur, except when you are burning, even though you're destroying the wood. That's still chai mishum mavir. And so he makes the chabura as chai because of Netilas Neshama, even though he is making wound, which is obviously a negative thing. And the Korban brings down because the mavir min asach monas trefas bas kohen b'Shabbos the mekalkelu, since the Torah forbids you to carry out the sentence of burning a daughter of a kohen to death on Shabbos, although that's literally burn her. But the point is to use the heat there, even though it's mekalkel shema mekalkel b'avara chayiv, and you will see how mekalkel chabura is going to be chayiv. Chabura mitzvah kol misha mila, since you need a pasuk to permit mila on Shabbos. Shami the you must see that. Otherwise, the chayvel is chayiv. So Bar Kapara says, if you don't need the blood, you're chayiv because chabura, and if you don't need the dirt, the ashes, you're chayiv because of mavir. So therefore, he has to learn that it's talking about as Korban says. Mukila b'yavesha has to be dried. Shenas chabur, not making wound. If it's lacha, you're making wound. Rabbi Yochanan says no, that you only chayev by chavul mavir, even though you're mekalkel, if you need the blood. Let's see, he says here, for example, you need the blood for your dog. So even though you're mekalkel by the person by the wound, you're masakin for his dog, and or le'efer, even though you need the ashes from the fire, even though you're mekalkel wood, you need the ashes. So according to him, making the wound in and of itself is not a problem. So even unless you need something from the wound, like the blood, here you don't need the blood. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, said, "Kam b'lacha anu kayomim." They could both be talking about by lach, and I'm not actually, at that line, I'm not sure. It could be that line is going on the next statement. Let me just check how they do that. Yeah, they learn it's going on the next statement. So, the first statement ends. So now we have to infer from that. So therefore, it doesn't matter if it's dry or wet, right? So you're never going to be chai because of chayvel. So even if it's really still moist, you don't need the blood. So what do you chayiv? So there's a very long Reb Chaim here. He says that the chayiv mishum goizes. If you use a tool, it's like shearing, and that's why it's also not because. So that's why it distinguishes between the hand, where the whole issue is chavala, and there's no issue of chavala since you don't need the blood. And could be the rabban, of course, but no the raisa issue, and therefore the base makes should be mutter, and where you use shear, we're using a keli, which is like shearing. A very interesting rivash. He says, it's a melachshen tzich gufa, because shearing you normally want the wool, and here you don't want the shorn off wart. He says no. The rivash says that in that giza it wasn't a mishkan, even shlo tzorach hatzemer, not for the purpose of the wool, even for the purpose of the hide. Such as when they needed to make the hides of the oros tchashim for the Mishkan. Interesting, right? So therefore, if you're using a keli and you're doing it in masaking the hide, not just to get the wool, that's also melach v'goyz that's going to Rivash. Then means that it could be the melach shein tzricha gufa, but nevertheless, since melach shein tzricha gufa is also chamor, and. According to Rabbi it's not the rice. So we're going to have Shimon. So the Rabbanan. But since it's possible to do it with a hand, they weren't matir to do it with a keli. Okay, so the two of them shorting either it's tzrich legufa, rivash, or even it's ein tzrich legufa. First of all, I don't know why it doesn't mention according to Rabbi it'd still be the rice. But even according to Rabbi Shimon, still since you could do it beyond So don't do bekeli. And then Rabbi Chanina, Shem Yochanan said, "Kam lacha on a kam." No, both are about lacha, right? And what's the difference between the two of them? Who should the dam? The Psachim, for some reason, needed the blood. This would look so much better. We go back to the Korban shot. And we're talking about the animal itself. So it could be switch back to the animal. So in any event, so it's also because you need the blood, and therefore it's chayvo tzorich ledam is also. And now, so in Psachim you need the blood, and Eruvin you don't need the blood. Okay, it means the claim has another little lumdasha piece, but well, not essential for understanding. Okay, hello, Gimel. Kohen Shloka Betzor, Kohen who has a wound on his finger. Kohen Gemi, you can put on a bit of bulrush in the mikdash. Avlam but not outside around the Medina. It's not a place where it's going to make a chatzitza, but it's not that eretz to have an open wound. So therefore he covers it with this bit of this bulrush. But you're not allowed to use the Gemara is going to say you're not allowed to use a beggar because you eat your begodim. Okay, you're only allowed to wear 4 begodim, not 5. Im lo tzidam, if it's your doing in order to get out blood, kamakan also, then that's forbidden, even in the base of mikdash. So that is chabola, and if you need and it's also couldn't be if lo tzidam you need the blood, it would be even called Rabbi Yochanan, as we saw before, be into the Raisa, but certainly according to Bar Kapara, it would be the Raisa, and even side the Raisa mamash, it's carved to the Raisa, so therefore we don't let you do it on even the base of mikdash. So you said before, not every shvus to the matzah in the base of mikdash. Boski melech gabi kevesh. You can sprinkle salt on the ramp in order to prevent people, if it's slippery, to prevent people falling. Shushlo yachlik, in order to that people don't slip. Umamalin bibor hagola b'gaga b'shabbos. You can use a pulley to raise up water from a bore on Shabbos. Mibor hagodo. From the Boragodo, Berakar B'Yontif. So there's Bnei Moshe here. My Boragodo Shabbat from this well in the Zora. Begalgo b'Shabbos. Shabbos also mas begalgo. No, Shabbos normally don't let you use a pulley. Shem alim because it's very efficient. And you might fill up water for your garden, like korboso or your korbo. You also have stuff planted. Umakim lake lemikzoachi. A place where there's no reason to make such a gzeira. Going to ancient gina, so you don't have a garden. Or we got a custom of a small pulley. Both similar. Mutham masnai gabel Shabbos. Not concerned that you're going to make a loud noise. The law will a kol shel shirva. They only answer the melodic sound. That's why you're allowed to knock on the door because it's not a melodic sound. So even though I guess for other purposes, which you can use the water in the base of mikdash, nevertheless they allowed you to use this allow you to use the pulley on Shabbos in the base of mikdash. The Reb Chaim is very makatzer. He just says we're not concerned from the that Shmos Kol. He says that's the main concern. And the base of mikdash not concerned because that's Shmos Kol. Okay, but not all the bars. He says you're allowed bar gola b'gal b'Shabbos. B'Shabbos you bar godol. And Shabbos you have to take a bar gola. Bear care b'yontif. And from the cold bore, the on yontif. So he says It's called Be'akar because of my makar, because it's because it was fresh water, Maim Chaim. So the main much says, Al Pi Heter Nevi'im Sheminayim Shetiru Sham B'Medina. They allowed it in the, even outside the Beis HaMikdash, from the Bor HaGadol, and the Be'akar and B'Yontif. B'Shashal L'Regel, when they needed water for Aliyas HaRegel. Kedama Gemara. Be'akar Nikra Shem Be'er Chaim, Lashon Mekorhu. So it's not for Lashon cold, but Lashon of source. Shar Be'eshemi Loitir, they weren't matir the other Be'eros, and the more is going to explain the parameters. So this is really the last part is my Bor HaGola Begaga B'Shabbos Bor HaGola Be'akar B'Yontif. It seems that this is the allowed to do this in the Beis HaMikdash, and even outside the Beis HaMikdash in certain boroughs, right? In the Beis HaMikdash, they're allowed to do it from the Bor HaGola, and outside the Beis HaMikdash, Bor HaGola or Be'akar, but it sounds like simply by Yontif, because of only Rego, and not just every single day. And again, Mara is going to explain the parameters. And that's it for today.